Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Hello and welcome to this final session of Arctic Frontiers. We're calling this session Stories from the Coast, because in the Arctic, the coast is where everything comes together. The ocean feeds communities, it creates jobs, it holds culture, language, and identities, especially for the indigenous communities across the Arctic. But that foundation has been increasingly shaken by the pressures that the region is facing today, the dizzying changes that are taking place and that are affecting the Arctic and its ocean. In the past year alone, we've seen record ocean temperatures, we've seen shrinking sea ice, we've seen stronger storms, changes that are already reshaping food systems, travel and safety along Arctic coasts. And in the Arctic, livelihoods, security and resilience are deeply connected, like so much else. When coastal communities are hit, the impacts ripple far beyond the shoreline. Adapting to this reality isn't just about finding new technologies or revised policies, it's about local knowledge, political leadership, and cooperation across borders, making sure that new opportunities strengthen rather than replace traditional ways of life. If there's one word that has popped up again and again, not just today or in previous days, but throughout this week, it's trust, or the erosion of it. Trust between allies, trust between governments and indigenous peoples, trust between younger generations and political leaders. So today we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that, to look at where trust has been shaken, where it's been lost, but more importantly, how we can rebuild it to keep communities strong and connected and to maintain the social fabric that holds them together. So in this session, we'll begin by listening to young voices with first-hand lived experiences of the changes that are unfolding across the high north, from the Nordic Arctic all the way to Alaska. Then we'll turn to the leaders who will be joining us on stage to ask how trust can be rebuilt, how hope can be strengthened, and what they can do to sustain and support the Arctic's most important asset, its people, to ensure the resilience of coastal communities and to ensure that they are being heard, seen, and valued. So, without further ado, it's my pleasure to invite our first speaker, who comes from Southwest Alaska. She currently lives in New York City, where she serves as one of the youth advisors on climate to the UN Secretary General. A native Alaskan, she has seen firsthand the trail of devastation and destruction that was left behind by increasingly powerful storms and typhoons in the place where she still calls home. Please join me in welcoming Charity Ropati.
Waka, winga yubuho, yuktunaguvach, jaimunga, Kangagunak, Alaska. Hello everyone, my name is Charity Ropati. I am Yupik and Samoan. My given name is Aguvach, and I come from the native village of Kangagunak, Alaska, a tiny community on the coast of Southwest Alaska. In 1967, families moved from Quigligunak to create Kangagunak. My great-grandfather, Inakak, and other men moved our homes by tying ropes around them. And then they used a snow machine and dog sleds to bring them 11 miles northwest away from the rising waters. Our families moved because they knew that the ground was sinking due to the thaw of permafrost. They knew and they thought ahead. We did this without the help of the federal government, state organizations, and aid. Time and time again, we have seen indigenous peoples, not only in Alaska, but throughout the world, make these hard decisions and sacrifices, solely relying on themselves to ensure the survival of the next generation amidst a changing climate. This is the story of how my community came to be, and in part, how I came to be. Today, those in the West and the global North call this type of move a managed retreat. But to my people, it was really just survival. That 11-mile trek left an immense scar. Communities that are forced to retreat are often left behind. And even now, my village lacks basic infrastructure, services like clean and running water. More than 50 years after my great-grandfather helped move our community, I moved from Alaska to New York to study civil engineering at Columbia. I wanted to better understand the same permafrost that my great-grandfather knew and understood so well, but I also wanted to bring water back home to my community. I am the first Alaska Native woman to graduate from my department at the School of Engineering in its 270-year history. And today, I serve as a water engineer. My great-grandfather built mud houses out of wood, mud, and water. He made bow and arrows that can kill mammals like walrus, which we still rely on. He built kayaks out of driftwood, bending it into perfect seafaring curves, while the women in our family sewed sealskin on it. This is who I have behind me, and this is the legacy that I carry. I was always born of engineers. We are taught to respect all living things. The land gives us animals and birds. The water gives us fish, seals, and whales. And in my culture, they are considered our relatives. There is a close relationship between the human and animal world, and we believe that humans and animals communicate through Xlamyo. And these relationships are governed by rules. But what happens when these rules are violated? When the rules are broken, that food source becomes scarce or disappears entirely. And this is what we're seeing across the Arctic and across the world. The act of assigning value to land and commodifying its resources directly contradicts everything we are taught. Our salmon are disappearing from our rivers, our sea ice is melting, permafrost is thawing, and sea levels continue to rise, while my people continue to die because of this. What more do you need to know? We are taught that the presence of our sea ice ensures the return of our sea mammals. But tell me what we are to do when that sea ice is no longer there, and when our rivers no longer flow with salmon. Indigenous peoples make up less than 5% of the world's population, yet we protect 80% of its biodiversity. And despite this, entire ecosystems are dying because leaders from across the world are unwilling to do what we all know needs to be done: a just and immediate transition away from fossil fuels. That's the cause. I remember my grandmother teaching me how to cut fish for the first time back home in Kagaginak. My hands shook as I awkwardly held the ulu, cutting salmon to hang on a rack made of driftwood. And when I finished, I lifted the fish toward her. She grinned and told me that it looked like shark bait. Her gentle teasing really filled me with joy. The ability to hunt and subsist as our people have for thousands of years, to dance and sing in Yuktun, our native language, to dream without the fear of possession, occupation. These are the dreams of my generation, and these are dreams I want for all of our children. Even amidst devastation back home in Alaska, my family and community still laugh. We tease each other, we grin at the next generation, and we'll call their first cut of salmon shark bait as well. We find wealth through this kinship. It's important we practice this. But I want to be very clear that joy does not erase what we are currently living through. In recent years, we have experienced storms of a scale and intensity our elders tell us they have never seen before. Typhoon Halong tore through our region. It devastated communities in Western Alaska. Homes drifted into the ocean, and over 1,500 people were evacuated, my relatives. Our people became climate refugees in lands that we have called home for thousands of years. The floods even reached our cemeteries. The bones of our ancestors, our people, are submerged beneath this rising water. And even in death, my people are not spared from drowning. My great-grandparents, Nakak and Annan, have been lost to the flooding. And yet we are told that this is our fault. We are told to answer in kindness and to give grace to those who offer nothing but empty promises. And I refuse that. I refuse to accept a world where our dead drown and our living are told to be patient. There must be accountability and justice for every delay that has cost us land and life, and every decision that has treated our survival as Indigenous peoples as optional. But people throughout the world came together, and millions of dollars were raised to help our communities through the Western Alaska Disaster Relief Fund. Traditional foods, dried fish, seal oil, and more were provided to our people by other people on the ground, by our own people, by other Alaska Native people, and I am so thankful for these efforts. Our people have always known how to adapt. We plan ahead, we have moved entire communities, and we take care of one another. But adaptation without accountability is abandonment, and we cannot continue to be expected to survive of a crisis that we did not create. So when I ask you to act, I'm asking also for responsibility and for solidarity. I'm asking for this just and immediate transition to uphold our rights as Indigenous peoples and for direct investment in the safety, dignity, and self-determination of Indigenous communities throughout the Arctic. We are still here, we are still fighting, and we are still choosing joy despite all of this. So please do not fall into despair and do not lose hope. Guyana Juknuk, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Charity. Such a powerful message. Such deep inspiration in what you carried with you, the raw emotions, but also the sheer determination, the conviction that we must right the wrongs of the past, but at the same time, not hold ourselves back. Keep going with adaptability to survive and thrive, with justice, responsibility, and accountability. Thank you so much for showing us as well that in hardship, there is greater resilience and, crucially, hope. Our next speaker is a Skolt Sami fisherman and a student at the University of Lapland in Finland. Now, he's seen how changing ocean conditions are affecting Finland's salmon populations. He's seen it up close, and he is here to share his experiences with us, to tell us how it has affected him personally, but how it's also affected the lives and livelihoods of others who depend on them. He just reminded me that he calls himself the ears and eyes of the ocean. Please welcome Vesa Orasalo.
Hello, my name is Vesa and I'm a Skolt Sami. And I was asked to tell you about the salmon and salmon fishing. And thank you for listening to my story. Salmon, the fish that is most likely to evoke the strongest emotions. For some, it means money. For some, it means passion. For me, it means life. It means connectedness to the land. It is a cornerstone to my own life. When I was a child, I always lived in the moment. Every summer, I was fishing salmon by the river Näätämö, the Finnish side of Neidenelva. And I remember casting my lures to the river, watching my father check the nets. I remember this small boy gutting a big salmon on a rock under the midnight sun with the mosquitoes around me. This living in the moment continued to my teens, when I noticed that I live now in my memories. Memories of big schools of salmons jumping upstream in numbers so high it was hard to count them. At some point, I wasn't anymore laying on the riverbank and seeing this. What happened to those moments with the big schools of salmon? From the end of 2010s, the salmon population in whole Finnmark area has declined rapidly. Most notoriously in Tana River, where the locals have really suffered because of it. I know this as less salmon was seen and caught in the river. We, as locals, as Charity also said, that we have been getting a lot of blame to us. Even though the traditional fishing and our part as a fisherman has declined a lot. There is only a handful of people left in Europe who are allowed to fish traditionally. Same time, the sports fishing has grown into bigger part, start to dominate on the salmon, and the fishing on the sea has been active in recent years. At some point, maybe around 2015, I noticed that the color of the meat started to be more pale on the salmon. And this indicates changes on the ecosystem in the sea. I noticed that the past summers have been more dry, more hot, and the water temperatures have risen. And this has created that we have experienced more drought, and now the water has been slightly more dark. The aquatic vegetation has increased, and with that, the northern pike population has grown. And I think that can lead to this higher predation on smolts. Some reasons we might not even know yet. For example, car tire particles with compounds like 6-PPD, they could have their effect on salmon. They have their effect on coho. Other chemicals might have an effect on Atlantic salmon. And I encourage every researcher here to check on these chemicals to figure out the reason that could kill the salmon. But one big reason we know is the fish farming in Norway, the salmon farming. And I believe that the biggest way to protect our salmon is to take off these salmon farms from Norway, take them on the land or close fjords, so we don't get the negative effects of them. In central and southern Norway, according to the Natural Institute of Finnish Natural Institute of Natural Resources, something like that, they have data that 30% of salmon mortality happens because of the fish farms. And at this rate, we are going to lose the salmon. And with that, we are losing parts of language and parts of culture, because salmon connects people. In our communities, everybody talks about it. We gather together and we share the traditional knowledge, language, stories, and this breeds life into culture. Of course, we need to control our fishing in the rivers too, but we need to protect ourselves in the meantime. We cannot kill the salmon. We cannot kill ourselves protecting the salmon. Everything should be in balance. And this protection in the river is just a bandage to the wound. To stop the bleed, we need to tackle the problems in the sea where the actual problems are. Don't get me wrong, I understand the value of these blue economies, but do they understand the value of the culture and wild nature? I just ask that we wouldn't kill the richness that we have, the salmon populations. Because one day, I hope my children could share the experiences of that small boy on a rock cutting a salmon. Thank you for your attention. Spasibo.
Thank you so much, Vesa, for sharing with us the dreams of that young boy, the aspirations of the fisherman that you've become today, and the growing concerns of Sami coastal communities, a cry from the heart, really, to politicians to find that right balance. Now, our final speaker is a postdoctoral researcher in oceanography and climate dynamics at the University of Bergen on Norway's southwestern coast. He is a non-Arctic scientist who recognized early on just how important it was to focus his research on the Arctic, not just for understanding how our rapidly changing climate was affecting us, but for helping us as well adapt to it. So what drew this German scientist north? How did he end up so closely connected to the Arctic? Let's find out. Please welcome Dr. Jakob Dorr.
My name is Jakob, and I'm a researcher at the University of Bergen and the Bjerknes Center for Climate Research. And I'm working on understanding the present and the future of the Arctic Ocean. And today, I want to tell you the story of how I got into doing Arctic research. But I also want to tell you about the future of one of the fastest warming regions of the planet, the Barents Sea, right to the north of here, which will see quite large changes until 2050 already, which will have a lot of impact. So I was born in Germany. As a meteorology student in Hamburg 10 years ago, I didn't have much to do with the Arctic. That was until 2017, when I got the opportunity to study one semester in Svalbard. I had heard of the large changes in the Arctic, but it was only when being there in the Arctic that I realized the extent of those changes. Communities adapted to snow and ice, suddenly threatened by landslide due to excessive rain. Fjords, once ice-covered, now open the entire winter. This sparked my interest in understanding and studying the large changes in the Arctic. During the stay, I went on a research cruise going north to the sea ice edge. After reaching the sea ice, I remember looking to the north towards the permanently ice-covered central Arctic, thinking it would ever only become ice-free if we really do not manage to cut our emissions. However, a few years later, in 2019, I was part of a team that used climate models and showed that we will see ice-free conditions in the Arctic in summer by the middle of the century, even if we manage to strongly reduce emissions in the next years and decades. Remember, the middle of the century, 2050, is now closer to the year 2000 than the year 2000. This means that a future with at least some ice-free summers is going to happen. This inevitable loss of summer sea ice will bring big changes to the Arctic system, including the Arctic Ocean and its coastal communities. And understanding those changes motivated me to continue doing Arctic research. And so I went to do a PhD in Bergen. The Arctic is warming much faster than the rest of the planet. But there is one region within the Arctic which really stands out as a hotspot of warming, and that is the Barents Sea. The Barents Sea region has already warmed by a staggering 4 degrees in the northern parts and has lost a large part of its sea ice cover, not just in summer, but also in winter. Last year, together as a team of scientists, we looked at the future of the Barents Sea we can expect, both for the middle of the century, in 2050, but also for the end of the century. And what we found is that by the middle of the century, the Barents Sea will mostly be ice-free, not just in summer, but year-round, and will further warm by several degrees. Now, this will have large impacts on the ecosystem. For example, there could be changes on shifts in the spawning sites of fish species, like the Atlantic cod. And these impacts will have consequences for the local coastal communities and their economic activities. There are still big uncertainties in how large exactly the changes are going to be until the middle of the century. But crucially, we found that just like for the summer sea ice in the Arctic, these changes are now mostly independent of our future emissions already. So since there's little we can do to still mitigate those changes, I think our focus for the 2050 horizon should be to better understand, or as best as possible, the changes and to adapt as best as possible. The Norwegian government's Arctic Ocean 2050 initiative will play a large role here in preparing us for the changes in the Arctic until the middle of the century. Of course, our efforts to reduce emissions and to reduce warming are still very important, and they will mostly determine changes further into the future, beyond the middle of the century. For the Barents Sea, for example, increasing emissions will lead to strong further warming, while reducing emissions as quickly as possible will likely stabilize the warming levels towards 2100. So this means that the best strategy for the future management in the Barents Sea, and in fact the entire Arctic, is to prepare for the changes in the middle of the century while also trying to mitigate the changes beyond that. And then lastly, the Barents Sea is well connected to the rest of the Arctic Ocean and to the Atlantic further south. A bit similar to my journey from Germany via Svalbard and into Arctic research, warm water from the Atlantic flows northward along the coast of Norway and into the Barents Sea and into the Arctic. And with it, it brings, for example, heat and nutrients that are very important for the local ecosystem. So, to adapt our local coastal communities, we do not only need to monitor and understand the local changes, but also the changes further south, as they will impact the local changes as well. And at the same time, waters in the Barents Sea travel further into the rest of the Arctic, and the Barents Sea is a gateway from the Atlantic to the rest of the Arctic. So changes in the Barents Sea will be transported further into the Arctic and impact coastal communities there. So, to be prepared for the changes to our local coast in the future, we need to understand the connected Arctic Ocean as a whole. And to do that, we will need a lot of motivated people working together on different aspects of the future Arctic Ocean. And just like I was brought to the Arctic through research programs, witnessed the large changes for myself, and got motivated to do Arctic research through that, the Arctic Ocean 2050 program and other programs will bring many new people to the Arctic to work together to prepare for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakob, for highlighting this significant connectivity that binds us together, the Arctic, you say, as a deeply interconnected system, and why understanding those connections is so crucial as we look toward Arctic Ocean 2050 and what lies ahead. So we've heard about disappearing salmon, intensifying storms, shifting ocean systems across the Arctic. The big question now is, how do these human stories, how do these natural changes actually influence and shape the decisions and the choices that our political leaders make? Please welcome Marianne Sivertsen Næss, Minister of Fisheries and Ocean Policy of Norway, Hanna Katrin Fredriksen, Minister of Industries of Iceland, and last but not least, Elsa Berg, who is Mayor of Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands. Welcome, ladies. So we got the gender balance right. We've shifted it all the way to the other extreme. We're not complaining. I hope the audience won't mind. All right. So on a more serious note, let's begin, Minister Næss. Let's begin by picking on some of what you heard. Of course, everyone here knows how important fishing is for Norway. You're the second largest exporter of fish and seafood globally after China, and you've been second quite consistently. In fact, fisheries are Norway's second largest export industry, just after oil and gas. So what happens here in the ocean really, really matters for Norway. I want to start by by some of the statements, or perhaps the frustrations that echoed through Vesa's words. Though he was speaking about Finland, but Finland and Norway have this sort of similar and long history of managing salmon fishing together. How do you respond to his frustration about the need to find a balance between overfishing and allowing communities to continue doing what they do?
First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for sharing your stories. It's really powerful and important messages. When it comes to finding the balance, I think that is maybe the most important thing we do at the moment, because we see how climate change affects all of us. It affects the ocean industries, and it also affects our lives. And it will continue to do that if we don't manage to find the balance in a better way than we have been so far. So I think maybe the most important thing is to rely on the science, first of all. We have to manage our ocean and building it on research, what we know and what we can do better that we haven't been able to do before. And in Norway, I would like to say we do a lot of ocean managements that are sustainable to make sure that we can harvest from the sea also for the generations to come. But of course, there are things like climate change that's been, like the salmon and how it impacts, but also finding the balance between different industries in the ocean to make sure that we always put biodiversity and taking care of the ecosystems at the same time as we make sure that we can still have food production in sea. And for like aquaculture, I think he mentioned that as an example. Of course, we have to do things better than we do today when it comes to aquaculture. That is also one of the reasons why we in Norway have launched a new white paper to make sure that the aquaculture industry, from now on, there are more individual incentives. That is it's supposed to be a good thing when you are going to be rewarded if you take care of the environment and you also have a high fish welfare and make sure that the balance is better. So I think science and knowledge is one of the keys here, and also acknowledging that the climate change affects us all, but also in different ways, especially when it comes to indigenous people and how you traditionally live your lives and what's important from you grew up, it's part of your identity, and how things are changing. It's quite challenging.
And Norway has been investing heavily in understanding how the future of the ocean is shifting. Jakob mentioned the Arctic Ocean 2050 initiative, which includes a commitment of 1 billion kroner over a period of 10 years, the largest research effort that Norway has ever undertaken. Looking at Norway, but also beyond it, when we talk about the spirit of collaboration, how much can this help other similar nations build the resilience that is needed?
Yes, and that is also important, thank you, because one thing is that we have to put all the efforts into science and knowledge, but also collaboration across borders, across nations, and also across industries. So I'm very happy, for instance, how we collaborate in the Arctics when it comes to make sure that we harvest from the sea in a sustainable way. We have agreements between, when it comes to pelagic and mackerel, for instance, both Norway, Iceland, and UK, and we have all these agreements to make sure that we don't take too much out of the sea that is not sustainable, and that we continue to harvest off the surplus and not.
And you have an agreement with Finland, a near ban on salmon fishing.
I think maybe when it comes to the wild-caught salmon, and that is the climate, the Minister of Climate and Environment responsibility. But of course, that is also one important agreement that,
Talking about, again, collaboration, let's look at Iceland and what Iceland is able to do, Minister Fredriksson, because it's often held up as a model of fisheries management. And you've gone through quite a few tough experiences in the past that have required strong decisions, courageous decisions, to put quotas and quota systems to reduce overfishing. How has this worked out for you in Iceland? Can it be replicated elsewhere? Has it paid off?
I think the short question is definitely has, but it came at a cost. And I just, if I may, just start with saying how thankful I am for the stories, the strong presentations that we had here, because it's important for us to remember that as vital it is for us to build our fisheries management strategy on research and knowledge. And we have to do that. It has to continue to be the cornerstone of our strategies, and we are undergoing, just like Marianne explained, also in Iceland, we are undergoing changes, reviewing this, reforming it concerning its future direction, just to take into account new technologies and new threats. But at the same time, it's vital that we don't forget the connection of the dire impact it has on people's life, especially along the coastlines that we all know. We don't take it up to the level in the studio of researchers only, scientists. We have to find that mixture. And then you come to your question. Back in the 80s, last century, we were facing, like so many other nations, overfishing, serious overfishing that was threatening to impact our economy, in addition to of course, the ocean a lot. So we implemented quota systems that we needed at that time, and they reflected the need to preserve natural limits rather than short-term pressures, but it was just vital for us. But these decisions posed significant challenges to our coastal communities, including population decline. We implemented as well legislation that allowed for companies kind of to sell or rent quotas, and just to make sure, I mean, fishing was the single most important export industry of Iceland, so we needed also to make sure that we would gain enough, this would be enough to support our economy. But as you know, sustainability rests on 3 pillars: environmental, economy, and then the social one. And during those changes, we didn't look as much into the social impact as we should have. And even maybe looking back in fairness, we didn't have the resources back then to understand what would happen. But what did happen is that it posed significant challenges to those coastal communities, and changes that made many of the small villages in town lose their livelihood, people moving to the Reykjavik area, the capital area, and changes that are even still ongoing. But fortunately, we have been able to turn that around with new opportunities.
Tell us more about the new opportunities and how you were able to overcome these challenges.
New opportunities, if I may, just before I leave behind this quota system, after having implemented legislation that made the fishing industry even more valuable than it had been as in terms of our export value, we implemented a special fishing fee, like a natural resource rent, if you will. Having made this industry very valuable, we just wanted to make sure that the communities would gain from that. It wasn't enough. So last year, I've been now a minister for 1 year, and the very first thing I did when I came into office was to change the law on fishing fee. I call it correction. So fishing companies pay significantly more now for the use that they have on the natural resources that belong to the nation. So that is just to make it very simple. And we use that income to build up our infrastructure, transportation, and other infrastructure needed to build up new opportunities. And then we come to that. And we have 2 main industries that are strong and going upwards, and that is tourism. And our main challenge now is to have it the whole year-round tourism around the country. And we will do that along with building up the infrastructure and transportation. And then there is this huge opportunity that we have in sustainable fish farming or aquaculture. And we are now in the midst of introducing a new and stricter legislation with regards to, for example, monitoring and penalizing genetic mixing and other things. And that is an industry that we are looking into using new technologies and making sure that we have the right incentives for close containment and for other things that make it a viable business without posing a threat to our nature.
All right, so diversification helped you
Yes.
to compensate, but I wonder where it left the local, smaller fishing businesses, local fishermen.
They suffered in the beginning, for sure, but there is still ongoing. I mean, they're not closed down everywhere. We have fish and we have fish processing also, and I have to salute our companies that they have made a lot of effort into making the most out of each fish that we catch. We don't just sell the fish as food. We use it for cosmetic, we use it for medication, we use it basically for every mensurable thing. And that has been innovation that but it's been amazing to follow that. So that is a blooming business as well. So we do some fish processing yet. But in those villages, tourism has been extremely welcome, and I know that young people in particular, they are starting to educate themselves to be able to work with that. And I admire how they do that in context. They use the nature, they use what we have. And for example, whale watching and kayaking, all those things connecting
To the ocean.
Yes, exactly.
Mayor Berg, let's talk a little bit about the Faroe Islands, which are deeply connected to the sea, of course. About 90% of exports actually come from it. For you, it's about the ocean, the land, nature, and its people. How much of what you heard resonated with you, and how have changes on the ground affected the lives and livelihoods of generations of people in the Faroe Islands?
Thank you so much for that question. First and foremost, I would really like to thank the storytellers. From the bottom of my heart, it was very touching and very important for you to tell your stories, both from the scientific perspective, but also from the communities at the forefront. Storytelling is of huge importance. And from my island communities up in the north, storytelling has always been so important. It has been for entertainment, where we still have old stories. But today, the stories are important to be told in my local community as well, and I would wish we would tell more of them. In recent years, decades, maybe a few centuries back, there have been huge changes in our local ecosystems. Vesa, you mentioned the acute moments, or the moments that you've experienced with the salmon in your local rivers being gone, and you remember it. In our communities, the changes have been slow, so the remembering of what is plenty of fish, or plenty of seabirds, or plentiful of cod is almost forgotten. So what my generation sees as a good day of fishing, or a good day of bird catching, is just a fraction of what was historically a local food source that was so important for us. So concretely, that's an effect we're experiencing. These stories are important, not only to tell the seriousness of the changes happening in the ecosystems, they are also important because they hold hope as well. These stories of what once was, they include what also can be. And if we manage to keep these stories close to our hearts and our minds and our policies, we can actually make efforts to restore nature, to restore ecosystems, and our thrival and survival also in remote communities, more remote than the Faroe Islands also. So that spoke to my heart, and I think it's incredibly important for us politicians to listen and to act.
And I want to touch briefly on two of your key priorities. One is regenerative tourism, and the other one is the blue bioeconomy. I know you'll be hosting a major ocean conference in May in the Faroe Islands, and you often play a key role as a bridge between larger ocean nations like Greenland, Iceland, and Norway. How important are these initiatives for you in terms of, as you say, turning pledges and promises into actions?
We want science-based policies. We want the communities to be engaged. And having the tourism industry, which is increasing and still growing, having that industry turning to benefit society, and not only benefiting the society, but also working in a regenerative way is very important. And hosting important and also large conferences on ocean and sustainable tourism is pivotal. And to us, it's also very important that these conferences, we get so much information, scientists and knowledge to our islands, and those events, as a municipality, we see it as our work or our job to be a part of the conferences also, so we host smaller events that the local people also can benefit from, and so that the knowledge is lasting longer than these few days that the tourism is there. In recent years, we've also started this very important, crucial initiative called Closed for Maintenance, which has gained global support, and it's a way of inviting visitors for conferences to also give something back to our community. So Closed for Maintenance has, for example, fenced off areas for nature to recover and building tracks for tourism to be more supporting for the land. Okay. So this new industry of tourism is also a new possibility for us to work in a sustainable way, which can improve our society.
Minister, Ines, talking about new opportunities and looking for creative ways towards sustainability. If we look at the big picture, the geopolitics, of course, surrounding the Arctic, I know that Norway recently signed a cod quota agreement with Russia.
Yes.
You described the negotiations as challenging, particularly given, of course, the current environment, the sanctions, the political tensions. How has it contributed to sustainable management in the North?
Oh, good question. I think it's really important. And we have been collaborating with Russia for almost 50 years. And that is about making sure that the quotas are based on scientific advices. It also has to do with control and also research. So together we have been collaborating through different times, and as it is at the moment, it's really challenging, as I said, and I wasn't quite 100% sure that we will succeed having this agreement in place, but I think for the coming generations, we have to struggle and have to put all our efforts into make sure that we also can have some kind of agreements, even though we are fully against what they are doing in Ukraine. But we are on the border with Russia. We have fish stocks that are both in the Norwegian continental shelf or economic zone, and also on the Russian side. So, and the fish doesn't know any borders. So we have to make sure that we together manage the quotas in a sustainable way. And one part of that is also because if we just close the collaboration, the consequences could be that the Russian fishing vessels will be on the Russia side, and there the fish is smaller. So if just imagine if they are still hunting or harvesting as much as they used to do, but they do it on a smaller fish. That will have consequences for years to come. So that is also one of the reasons why we make sure that on the one side we also, of course, follow the sanctions from the EU, but we have allowed fishing vessels to land fish in 3 ports in Norway. That is Kirkenes, Tromsø, and Båtsfjord. And the reason why is that way we can make sure that they still are doing the fishing in the Norwegian side because the fish is bigger. And also we have more control.
But it sounds inconsistent. Sounds like selective politics.
I think it's about actually preparedness, security reasons as well, because we know how important the fish is for the coastal communities. And if we do something that we don't manage the fish stocks in a sustainable way, that will have consequences not only for Norway, but also for Iceland, Faroe Island, EU, other countries that are depending on these fish stocks. So I think that we managed to still, in these challenging times, to have in place agreements, how much fish, what are the quotas going to be. I think it means everything for not just us, but for our security as well. Okay. Because we have to make sure that people can continue to live along the coast, to harvest from the sea, and to do what's, yeah.
I'll resist the urge of diving deeper into the politics, because I think it would be good now to just hear a little bit from the young, emerging Arctic leaders, the youth, to get their take on what is going on around them, the challenges facing the ocean and coastal communities, and the decisions that are being made at the very top.
There is one ocean that connects us all. We all rely on it, and our coastal Arctic communities are at the forefront of change. However, we are not all equal regarding adaptation.
In an ecosystem, bacteria would take 20 minutes to reproduce, but whales and humans need 20 years. By that time, the Arctic Ocean could be completely ice-free in summer.
As scientists, industries, and Arctic inhabitants, collectively we have so much knowledge.
As indigenous people, our role, rights, and centuries of knowledge has been long overlooked. We need meaningfully and respectfully braid all knowledge systems.
This must all behave as an interconnected network to drive fair and informed decision-making.
As young people working and living in the Arctic, we see a lot of initiative every day. We are contributing to our communities and driving innovation from the front line.
But the tide is pulling against us as the basis of our livelihood is changing. And as friends and colleagues move away, the social fabric of our coastal communities is thinning.
We have the grit and the vision. But to turn the tides, we need more than just hope. We need structural commitments. We are here to stay. Are you here to invest in us?
And as a mother, I want reassurance that my children and our collective future will grow up in a healthy Arctic. We have worked together before. Ecosystems have a recovering capacity. Adaptation is not enough. We also need mitigation. We are all interconnected.
What will you do in 2026 to ensure a healthy Arctic?
To turn the tide, we need more than just hope. We need structural commitment. Hope alone isn't enough. Minister Fredriksson, we touched earlier on the importance of political courage to make tough decisions. There are a lot of initiatives, we just heard, every day, but the tide is pulling against us. How do you stop making promises, on a global level? How do political leaders stop making promises and start taking real action, the kind of action that actually gives young people the hope they've been waiting for?
That's a big question.
It's a big question, but on a smaller scale, what would you say?
No, but absolutely. And I mean, one of the reasons, one of the issues is that we have now, for obvious reasons, been focusing a lot of cooperation in the North Atlantic and the Arctic with regards to security and defense. And it goes without saying in the times that we live now, and it's very important. But it's equally important that we do not divert our focus away from research and knowledge-based decisions into that. We do it simultaneously because we are trying to save our environment and save our livelihoods. We are focusing here on the ocean, of course, but for example in Iceland, where we have built up our industries using renewable energy, that is our focus and that is our commitment to the ecosystem. But at the same time, these changes are threatening our possibilities to do that, because in order to build up on renewable energy, we need our glaciers, we need our waterfalls. So that's a circle, a vicious circle that we are facing. And we need, as you said, we need to figure out ways to stop that.
And you've done extraordinarily well on renewable energy. 95%.
Yes, we did. I mean, we've absolutely used the opportunities that we have there. So I'm proud of that, but also very well aware of those opportunities that not every country has, and we do, and we need to use it wisely. But again, what can the politics do? I mean, for example, what we do when we are building up, for example, our fishing management industry, we rely on international marine research, European marine research, domestic marine research, and this is all threatened by a political instability. That is, you can't tear this apart. So we need to focus on that. But as I said earlier, we tend to, while we need to focus on science, we need to focus on scientists in order to be able to make the correct decisions. It's always a matter of this sustainability, the pillars of sustainability, and we must make sure that we don't lose focus on the livelihood of the people living the consequences directly. And if I may, just because you asked me earlier, how did your quota system affect the fishermen? And I forgot one thing that we did, and we did well, I think there. Could have done more, probably, but we take every year over 5% of the total quota dealt out. That is based on the advice from our Marine Research Institution. And we give that out to individual boats and fishermen around the country, so-called coast fishing. They don't go out, obviously out as far out as our bigger ships. Well, that's what we do. But again, I mean, I think that continue to work this together and focus on. We are all very well aware of the threat and the actions that we need to take. And political instability is the main threat today.
Yeah, and of course sharing knowledge is important, talking is important, but for someone who's covered the United Nations for so many years, it's a big talking shop. And so I wonder, Mayor Berg, you were saying earlier, talking about the value and benefit of hosting conferences, but how do you actually make sure that, all the wonderful talk that we hear actually translates into action? What are young people telling you?
It's a really good question, and I would really like to connect this question to the short film we just saw, where the people ask for interconnection, and I really do believe we need more of that in our policies, and we cannot forget that the reverse force, when we say climate action, that the forces working against climate action is delay, and more delay. Those are the forces we're working against. People saying the technology is not ready yet, or we could just open a little bit more oil production and then we could go to renewables, etc. What we need is a rapid and just transition, and to work on those forces of delay is co-creation of policies. It's interconnectedness. Every policy is climate policy, and we need also in all of this include the youth. Tórshavn municipality is at the moment working and preparing to establish a citizen assembly, and I'm a strong believer that this citizen assembly will be a good force to actually connect people and give them the stage to learn more about the climate crisis and share their opinions and thoughts on how we can actually mitigate the crisis. And they will share their policies in a report to the political system, and it is our job to use what we get from the report, and I'm really excited to see the outcomes of it. But the outcome of such a report, and including the people, also the young generation, is maybe the most important part of it, is that politicians, we often don't realize how worried our people are, and how they actually want climate action now. So what a citizen assembly can do is to showcase this in a paper, in a report, and positively handing it over to the politicians. And citizen assemblies in the UK and also other municipalities in the Nordic have used these. And oftentimes they show that the public, the people, they are more ambitious than the politicians. So yes, we need to include both young people, but also the local communities in so many ways. We need to listen to the person that never talks about climate. And also, we need to talk more about climate, because a certain percentage, a high percentage of us in this room, also in every day, is actually worrying about climate, but we're not talking about it.
Talk more and act more.
Yes. And we also need to share that we are worried, because this puts the topic on the political agenda.
Minister Ness, I mean, as a politician, how do you increase that connectivity? How do you connect more people, the youth and other local elements of society, to the decision making? Is it that you don't realize, what their concerns are, or that there's a political will that's still missing?
I think it's very interesting. On the one hand, I totally agree with everything you said. On the other hand, it's not any easy answers. I wish there were, but there aren't. So I think it's harder than ever because of the geopolitical shifts, the security tensions, and also the global competition, especially here in the Arctic, to find the right solutions and what is a just and rapid transition. If we are discussing the solutions, though, like wind at land, no, people don't want that. Wind at sea, no, don't want that. So all the solutions to make sure that we have a transition is not easy. It has some impacts also. So how to make sure that we, because I'm so totally agree with you, we have to do something because it's emergency is here. We see how climate change affects us all. But I think also...
A citizen assembly, would that be...
Sorry?
A citizen assembly, would that be taking it too far?
I think one thing is trust. You have been discussing trust, as I heard from the beginning here, and also the political instability. I think there are so many things going on at the moment that divides us, not connects us. So to manage to do a transition in things the way they are now, it's not easy. So I wish it was easy. And I wish we just could say, okay, let's do this and go forward to make sure that we stop climate change and we make sure that we take care of the nature and the climate and everything. But I think it's harder than ever.
Is it harder than ever, Minister, from your perspective?
I think so in one way, because you could say that we have access to more and deeper understanding and information on how serious the situation is, but at the same time we are dealing with waves of disinformation and fake news, and makes it difficult for people to understand and really get on board with what is needed. And then there's kind of a short-term interest, long-term interest that are not always go hand in hand for many people. So it is complicated, but the more people we get on board in understanding how important it is, and that we are truly, if I may, in some perspective of centuries, we are running out of time, then it will become easier. And for example, an agenda like has been here this week, this is my first time here, is extremely important. I'm guessing we will all go back home and we will talk about what we learned, experienced, have connected with other people and carry on and continue to work with this. And just like my fellow panelists here have both said, the importance of politicians and public go hand in hand, understanding and figuring out solutions is very important, because there is a resistance to big hurtful changes that are needed to be taken. So we need to have a common understanding what is needed and try to minimize the negative impact on that in the short term, if we are all in agreement that the long-term gain is there.
There's also a tendency, I would say, on the part of politicians to call any difficult situation complicated. But it can be simplified, can't it? I know you wanted to jump in and say something,
I just wanted
Minister.
to add, because I wouldn't like to have this impression that I think it's impossible to have transition. So, of course, we have the knowledge, we have the technology, we know what's needed. So I think the question is how to have people on board, and also when it comes to fake news and all the things going on the side that affects us and has an impact. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
This sentence, I don't believe in climate change, is all of a sudden just as valid as a researcher who has spent 30 years in researching this says, we're facing climate changes. I mean, this is complicated.
Yeah.
Exactly, and I really...
Let me get your final thoughts with the 2.5 minutes that we've got left. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing up the complexity of the climate crisis and the actions needed, and I totally agree with you. And I think also a response to this complexity that is solvable is that we have a collective responsibility. And we can do so much on a political level, on a governmental level, but also bringing in the municipalities and the local communities. But we also have businesses that are ready to take their part, and we also have so many organizations and NGOs that are also willing to take their part. And a part of this is also explaining the complexity and reaching out and saying we also need to deal with this together. How can we do this together? So I appreciate you bringing that into the debate.
It's about rising to the challenge and dealing with the issues urgently and with respect for each other in every community and every stakeholder. Minister, in the final couple of minutes, what's the way forward for you?
The way forward is exactly to get that common understanding, not on the threat, not on the issues that we are facing, but on the fact that we need to take actions. One of the ways that maybe if I may just add here in the end is the importance of young people educating themselves in these areas, in science, and just, you know, how local communities can thrive in the way forward so that we have all on board. And if there is anything that I can take with me from here above else, is the fact that in politics, and of course it's an ongoing thing, but we have to continue or even listen more to young people and local communities that are most affected by decisions or not decisions that we make or make not.
Minister Ness.
What to do from now?
What to do from now? What do you take from this conference, and how will you do things differently, perhaps?
I think we have to continue to do more of what we do, because first, as I mentioned, science and science-based decisions, and to make sure that our management of the ocean are about sustainability and taking care of the vulnerable marine ecosystems. I think that is really important, and protecting biodiversity. And then we have to make sure that we have new opportunities, new jobs. We have emerging ocean industries. On the other hand, we have to take care of the existing activity as fisheries, and that is really important. So we have to make sure that we harvest also from the wild fish in a sustainable way, and we have to work together as countries, neighboring countries, to make sure that we don't overfish.
And that's a lot on your plate. But if you were to pick one or two top priorities?
One or two. Sustainable ocean management. I think that is one most important thing that, from my point of view, have to continue with. And also seek more knowledge and research, and to even make better decisions for the future.
Minister Ness, Minister Fredriksson, Mayor Berg, thank you very much for this fascinating discussion, for bringing up so many important issues about the need to bring in the diverse voices that exist and that are ready to collaborate and enrich the discussions and hopefully take us to the finish line and turn all of these promises and pledges into concrete actions. Before we close, can I just take a moment to thank everyone for being here with us, and thank the organizers as well, who have brought such a diversity of voices here. and who have managed to bring us together again this year at such an important and timely moment for the region. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, James. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you to so many other people who've worked behind the scenes. And of course, Anu Fredriksson, the Executive Director of Arctic Frontiers. Thank you for having us once again. And with this, I'd like to invite you to the stage to deliver your final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for beautifully guiding us through these past 3 days' discussions and also for taking us to the finish line. Dear friends, the turn of the tide is brief, but this week we've used it to our advantage. Not with grandstanding or certainty, but with pragmatism, with an understanding of what is possible and commitment to what is necessary. At the start of this week, I quoted Henrik Ibsen, who wrote, "The strongest is the one who stands alone." We have showcased that in the Arctic, progress is never achieved alone. Our strength lies in standing together, even when our perspectives differ. Dear friends, this week we have practiced diplomacy. Not as a formality, but as a discipline. A commitment to listen as much as we speak, to seek understanding, and to build bridges. For that, I thank you. Thank you for your contributions and for strengthening our faith in our collective ability to carve a path forward, one that is realistic, resilient, and pragmatic. Safe travels, and welcome back to Tromsø in 2027.